am a warrior. I have answered my nation's call. I am an American airman. My mission is to fly, fight, and win. I am an American airman, wingman, leader, warrior. I will never leave an airman behind. I will never falter, and I will not fail.
All right, welcome back. It's Air Force Recruiting Services only live stream, The Back and Forth. And today we have got something super special for you. Rocking that polo, you know. So just like the Marine Corps is a section of the Navy, we have the Space Force in the Air Force. So it's not Department of the Air Force. It falls into its own branch of the military. But since we are so closely related, we wanted to give them some love. And we are going to spend today's show talking to some of the smartest people I've met in the Space Force and asking them all kinds of questions. We're going to talk about, I don't know, if the Enterprise is part of the fleet. Are there aliens out there? I don't know. It's up to you guys. You know what to do once we get to the question and answer section at the back half of the show. You guys put Q in the questions and the comments, and we will put your questions up on screen and we'll answer them right here. So before we get started and jump in, for context, we have got one of the coolest videos I've ever seen that has to do with the Space Force, and we are going to show you right now.
Today, space is essential not only to our way of life, it's absolutely critical to the modern way of war. GPS, ATMs, cell phones, gas pumps, traffic lights, power grids, guided missiles, surveillance, RPAs, ground combat control. There's no such thing as a day without space operations. You just don't see them. Earth is only half the battle. Cyber attacks and jamming of our satellites. Microsatellites that can create a debris field. At 17,000 miles an hour, a piece of metal the size of a coin can be weaponized. Now is the time for a military branch with a clear and singular focus on space. A military branch that protects the hopes and dreams of America and our way of life as the space domain becomes more and more contested. It's time for another giant leap. The United States Space Force is being built from the brightest minds across the space operations of the Air Force, our joint services, and the private sector. We aren't just getting ready for the near future, we're getting ready for the 22nd century. When our enemies ask, what if? We will have an answer. When foreign powers can build bases on the dark side of the moon, when private companies are inventing a new economy beyond our planet, we need to stay one step ahead of the future. And the future is where we'll make history. We will fight in an environment with no up or down, no left or right, where there are no borders and nowhere to hide. Our Space Force is defending our country, here on Earth and wherever our mission takes us. As commerce and exploration expand, we will imagine the unimaginable, anticipate the inconceivable, and prepare for the impossible. We won't just think outside the box. We'll think outside the atmosphere in one of the most challenging environments ever known.
That is awesome. I have got goosebumps. I don't know if you can see it or not, but that is legitimately one of the coolest videos for Space Force stuff I've ever seen. Opens up a ton of questions and really honestly gives us a peek into what it's like to be part of the newest branch of the DoD. And that is something special. So to help us answer some questions and to get to know our very own Guardian today, we have got Master Sergeant OP joining us. Welcome to the show, sir. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be on. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about one of the first things we see differently on a Space Force uniform rather than an Air Force uniform, because we're seeing you in your Space Force uniform. Rank looks a little different. There's some different things. Walk us through that.
Sure. The first thing is going to be the blue name tapes.
Okay.
I believe also a lot of folks have to have their occupational badge. So in the Air Force, you don't always see people wearing
Sure.
occupational badges. The insignia is going to be also blue, and then the American flag is going to be in
Oh,
color.
it's actually color,
Pad,
yeah.
yeah, badges are also in color.
Oh, that's
Both
cool.
sides.
But everything else on the uniform is pretty much the same as the Air Force, and actually pretty similar to the Army uniforms too, right?
That's right. You
Cool.
got it.
That's very cool. Okay, so are there any other, like, what are some of the biggest differences between the Space Force and the Air Force, other than in the name?
I would say if you are a person like me, you're involved in a day-to-day mission. When I was an airman, I didn't really hear a lot of stuff about the space domain and what was going on in space. But as a
Sure.
guardian, that is like 100% the conversation all the time, every day.
Okay. And what do you mean by space domain, and why wouldn't you hear that normally in the Air Force?
Sure, space domain is another way of saying all the things that are happening in the world related to space. So
Okay.
whether it's launches to space or satellites or missile warning, I never really talked about any of those things when I was an airman.
Okay. So you get to do that on a daily basis now, though.
Absolutely.
That's really cool. And from the video that we just watched, there's a bunch, like, satellites don't always look the same. Any kind of and you forgive me if I get some of this terminology wrong because I'm in the Air Force, even though I have a sweet polo on that says Space Force. But like aircraft or spacecraft that are out in space at, like we heard, 17,000 plus miles an hour, huge pieces of equipment. That's got to take an immense amount of work and coordination to keep that stuff all flying properly and maintained and all that stuff. Yes, no?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a team effort. This is the ultimate team sport. Being a guardian, all the different missions require all kinds of specialties, and it's a big challenge. So happy to be here helping out.
Awesome. Okay, so first things first, what is probably one of the most prolific myths that you can bust or dispel about the Space Force?
Oh, not too. A couple of years ago, I got the honor really to be an ambassador to the city of San Antonio through the Fiesta event,
Sure.
and I got a lot of questions about aliens, a lot of questions about tracking
Naturally.
aliens. So I would just say we are not tracking aliens.
Not tracking aliens. All right. I think, I remember when Space Force was started. I remember just the internet had a field day with it, and it's really cool to see it come into its own. We don't see as many people poking fun. Obviously, there was like a whole TV show based on like just this comedy realm of it, and it's a lot more serious than that. And it's really cool to see that such a large part of what the Air Force kind of handled before was able to be recognized for how important that is and how much the space domain requires of our attention and assets, that they were able to create an entirely new branch of the Department of Defense in order to support that. So that's really cool. So what kind of things do you do Space Force that I couldn't do Air Force, or you couldn't do Air Force when you were Air Force?
Sure, because of I try to keep it really simple. Just because of like legal authorities, guardians are assigned to certain missions that airmen normally wouldn't have been assigned, especially now that the Space Force is own distinct service. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, you could be a 19-year-old right now operating a fleet of spacecraft worth up to $1 billion. As an airman, you were
Wow.
able to do that previously, but now you cannot.
Okay. Well, first off, I would love to be a 19-year-old again. I don't know how I feel about handling $1 billion worth of spacecraft. That sounds like a lot of responsibility. So what would you say to somebody if they were to ask you, why do we even need the Space Force?
Oof, tough questions today.
Mm,
It really comes down to interest, right?
okay.
Before the Air Force is doing an awesome job by the way. So, but the Air Force had a lot of different missions, right? 5 core missions, and space
Okay.
was one of them. So I think just having a team of people focus on space and everything that is happening in space, what our friends are doing in space, what our adversaries are doing in space. That is
Sure.
why we need a space force.
Okay. Sounds like we've got some competition. We want to make sure that we have ourselves postured in a way that protects America and our interests, right? And it's
Absolutely, and
huge,
that's
right?
why.
Obviously, it's unknown huge at this point, you know. So there's there's a lot of responsibility up there. It totally makes sense. Ooh, okay, I'm
Absolutely,
getting
and
prompts there.
that's why recently the head, the chief of space operations, or
Sure,
the person in charge of the entire space force,
sure.
they redesigned the mission statement to capture what you just said. So
Okay. Tell me a little bit about your journey personally from Air Force to Space Force. What did you do in the Air Force, and how did it come to be that you made that transition over? What was that like for you?
sure, absolutely. So before I switched to the space force, I had been in the Air Force about 12 years,
Okay.
and one of the main reasons that I switched had to do with the fact that I wanted to challenge myself. It's just
Mm.
something in my family. My mom always stressed, like, if there's two roads, an easy road and a hard road, you just take the hard road. And I just felt like I was very good at my job in the Air Force, and I didn't seem like the challenges were uh, as frequent as I'd like them to be. And
Okay.
as you're standing up a new thing, there's just so many challenges can come along with that. So
Yep, for sure. So you're saying that when you were Air Force, you maybe felt like a little bit of a big fish, little pond, like you needed some more challenge, a little bit more thrown your way because you thought you could handle more?
absolutely,
How has the Space
absolutely.
Force done that? You know, I was lining that one directly up. Like, how does the Space Force fulfill that for you? And are they like, what's that like? What's your
Well,
challenge
you
load look
know,
like now?
you know what they say: be careful what you ask for.
Okay.
And absolutely, I've been challenged on a regular basis, especially from an academic point of view.
Oh,
Some of
okay.
the work, some of the work I'm doing now requires me to understand orbits more than I would like them, more than I
Orbits.
personally would like to understand orbits.
Not one
So,
of those things I would have ever pictured myself having to think about being in the military. And I think that kind of goes to prove why the Space Force is important. So, okay, if you can, tell me about one of the biggest challenges that you have dealt with so far, like job wise in Space Force.
sure, sure. In the Space Force, the mission itself is very, very focused on science and technology, and
Right.
science and technology is it's evolving on a daily basis. I mean, what we thought was possible 10 years ago is different than what we think is possible today. So just keeping up with all the developments in space is very, very challenging. Not just
Okay.
what we're doing, but what everyone else is doing.
Okay. How big is the Space Force compared to, say, for example, the Air Force, like personnel wise?
All right, I may not be the best person to take this question, but
Well, roughly from what you've seen, right?
you all time on the numbers. I think active duty, there's what, 380,000 airmen or something like that. The
Yeah.
Space Force
I would say the number
has
I think
less.
starts like a four. Yeah. It's
Yeah, yeah.
less than
So it's
half.
close to 400,000, right? So the Space Force, I think when you combine military personnel, civilian, enlisted officers, it's less than 20,000. So it's very,
Oh,
very small
wow.
force.
Wow, that is. That sounds pretty exclusive. Like if you've ever wanted to get, you know, to become part of a pretty exclusive club, this this might be your move. As you're seeing down there
Uh,
at the bottom of the screen, here shortly, we're going to get back to the back and forth portion of the show where we will put questions from you guys out in the audience, out there on all the platforms. We see your chat, your comments and stuff coming through right now. We see the love and some of the questions also popping through. You guys are professionals at this already, but put a Q in front of your question. That way we know which ones to sort out, and we will put those up later in the show and sneak peek to the rest of the show. We've actually got another special guest coming here in a little bit, but we'll introduce him shortly. So back to me learning more about Space Force stuff from Master Sergeant OP. What is one of the best things about being Space Force, in your opinion, for you personally?
For me personally, I've always had a very curious mindset. I like to learn a lot and go into the side quests, so to speak,
Okay.
of learning.
Okay.
So it's endless. it's endless about space. There's so many things you can learn. You really, for those people listening, if you really like learning, there's a lot to do in the Space Force in regards to that. So I mean, I just want to give you a little prop here. This is
Okay.
like my bedside. This is like my bedside book here,
Understanding
Understanding
space.
Space.
The
Right,
fact that
and
you
look
have
how
that so close to you right now, I think proves your point a little bit. And you said bedside. I have a feeling that you're like sleep on it just to get osmosis through the pillow, you know?
yes, yes.
Okay,
So
so
we're constantly, but just to follow up,
sure.
we're constantly learning on the job about different things. So just if someone likes to learn, Space Force is a great place.
Awesome. So let's pretend you and I, and this is 100% hypothetical. Let's pretend you and I have been friends for like 5 years or more. We were both Air Force together. You've switched over to the Space Force, and you're trying to convince me. And if I was like, okay, but why should I join the Space Force? Why should I leave the Air Force, which, that's the branch that I joined? What would entice me to go to the Space Force from Air Force like you did? Like, what would you tell like a good friend of yours?
Sure. You got so Air Force has been around since 1947.
Sure.
You have a lot of history, a lot of tradition, a lot of great people working in the Air Force. No doubt
Mm-hmm.
about it. There's so much writing on our future and on the space domain, what's going on in space. And I would just say, if you want to have a hand in like not just history, but really shaping what the future is going to look like of the Space Force, that's why that would be my challenge to you. Do you want to be a part of that?
Got it. I mean, I'm gonna have to. Where do I sign up? That's a great answer. So, if I understand it correctly, while there's a whole lot of reason to be part of the Air Force because of the legacy and its traditions and its history and where it's come from and where it's going, to be able to have an opportunity to have such an impact on the ground level of something as massive as an undertaking such as Space Force is one of those opportunities that you would highly recommend someone take advantage of. I'm pretty sure I
No
got that
doubt
message
about
pretty
it.
clear. That's
No doubt
awesome.
about it. No doubt about
Okay.
it. And I think it just makes sense because of sizing, right? The
Mm-hmm.
smaller the team you have, the more your individual contributions make to the larger sum of
Okay.
contributions.
Okay. Very cool. What does a day
Yeah.
in the life look like for you? Like, what's your day-to-day grind when you put on the uniform and go to work?
Sure. My day to day grind, I have 11 customers. I'll just say customers. These
Okay.
are teams, 11 teams that have these different information needs. They want to know, let's just give an example. Maybe they want to know what's going on in low Earth orbit, right? So for this particular case or this particular team, me and my teammates will research everything there is going on a weekly basis in that orbit, and
Mm-hmm.
we'll send them information updates as needed. Usually about once a week. But
So it's a
so
lot
my
of
day to day
data-driven
really,
stuff.
yeah, data driven stuff. Yeah, my day to
Okay.
day really looks like doing a lot of research, a lot of reading, some writing, and scheduling meetings with people to talk about what they wanted to know about.
Okay. Two things. One, I think I've been saying data wrong because I said data and you said data, and I'm not going to argue with a dude who sleeps with a book that looks like that next to his bed, for one. And for two, I think I might have lost it. So when you say that I got it. I remember. Define for me what low Earth orbit is. For us mere mortals that don't work with space anything, what is low Earth orbit? Like, how far away is that? Because you look up, for me, it's like anything past where an airplane flies, that's just space.
Sure. So the Earth is 6,378 kilometers. So I would say maybe 2,000 kilometers on top of that, the radius of the Earth. So 2,000
Okay.
kilometer altitude, if you want to just simplify it.
2,000 kilometers past the surface of the Earth and everything in between.
Yeah.
That's where
Sure.
most of the stuff is, right?
A good chunk of it, yeah, about 80 to 90% of spacecraft are in low Earth orbit. And
That's a lot.
for practical reasons, it's you don't have to have as fancy of equipment to transmit data when you're closer to the Earth.
Okay, that makes sense. Distance, right? So
Yeah,
you don't have to transmit
yeah,
stuff
yeah.
as far.
Yep.
So I'm not looking for an exact number here. I just know I've seen pictures and I've heard some numbers. Roughly how many pieces of man-made material are there in that low Earth orbit? I'm looking like super rough because, 10 years ago, if you'd asked me, I'd have been like, I don't know, a couple hundred. How many?
Oh man, this is a tough one, but please fact check me on this, okay?
Yeah, super grain of
But
salt with this
but
one.
yeah. So as far as like debris, I just want to make sure. Are you talking about spacecraft or space debris? Just
Spacecraft,
want
like
to clarify.
on purpose things that were put there.
Okay, on purpose. Okay, great. All right, great. That's great.
Because I'm not asking about
Yeah.
debris.
So
Because when something knocks
yeah,
into a
yeah,
rock, like you can't count all those pieces.
yeah.
Sure,
Well,
sure.
somebody's tracking them, but yeah, it's about just a rough number. I would say 10,000, just to make it easy for everybody. 10,000.
10,000.
Yeah,
Jeez, that's a lot of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
So definitely enough to keep your hands full, keep you busy.
But I do want to stress to everybody. So there's some predictions by the Government Accountability Office, the one recently that I saw, that
Hmm.
10,000 number is going to grow to 50,000 in the next 10 years. So imagine having that responsibility of understanding all that is going on. That's why there's a lot of emphasis on
No,
this
for
mission.
sure.
Yeah.
What is Space Force doing to plan for that increase? Like, what's the kind of level of effects that you feel when you can see the prep for that kind of increase in activity?
Oof. We could have an hour talk about this.
Well, we
There's a
got like
lot of
5 minutes
mission.
left before we
Yeah,
before we jump
I know,
into the
I
other
know.
half of the
But
show. So
I know.
truncate an hour
The,
into five.
yeah, no. I would just say there's a lot of emphasis on having not only the best guardians possible. So I think if we really attract top talent in terms of individuals who really care about what they do, I think that's going to help because then we can take care of all the different mission areas. I would love to walk through all the mission areas, but we just don't have enough time. And
Sure.
I would point someone to like the Space Force website where they can get a little bit more detailed overview of what missions that we're in charge of, just for sake of brevity.
Sure. Yeah. Spaceforce.com. Tons of information. Ooh, little known fact and a little shameless plug. If you go to the spaceforce.com website, there is like the process of a rocket being launched into orbit, everything from the countdown to the tower and like the people involved in the communication and stuff. If you go and listen to that and you click through the little like prompts that tell you how to go into the next phase of that flight, that voice should sound kind of familiar because that was yours truly. So I got to voice that
Oh,
stuff, which was pretty sweet.
that's
Um,
fancy. Yeah, that's
yeah,
cool.
it was really cool. Some studio time and a bunch of scripting. It was pretty sweet. So I want to ask one more question that's kind of going to be a little bit more nerdy toward like Air Force stuff. But if you're out there and you don't have a lot of experience with Air Force or Space Force or any other branch of the military, every branch has like some words or some sayings or some values that they hold in extremely high esteem. And in the Air Force, we've got our core values, right? Does the Space Force have core values that differ from Air Force, and how do they differ?
Sure. I would say, as being a prior airman, I would say the core values are very similar. Actually,
Okay.
I think you can take the Air Force core values and the Space Force core values, and you can draw lines to them. They're very similar.
Okay.
I personally wouldn't say that they're entirely different.
All right. What are the Space Force core values, or do you guys have specified ones?
Well, I mean, the service has specific 4-1s, but I'm just trying to think about like what does it mean to me on a daily basis and our teammates on a basis. I would point to commitment, for example. That's one of the four, and I think it takes anyone who's interested in being a guardian, just think about commitment. You're going to need to be committed to being a guardian, maybe short term, long term, but the missions are they can be quite difficult and quite challenging, And on a daily basis, I'm very challenged. And I have a lot of experience in the Department of Defense, so I would just have people thinking about that. But if they want to look at all the different core values, I would point them to the website.
Okay, cool. Gotcha. Bonus question. Is it harder to get into the Space Force than it is the Air Force?
I I don't know.
You
I
got
don't
you on
know.
the
I
hot
would.
seat.
I,
This is
would-
an opportunity. Like you made the right choice going Space Force, right? Of course it's
I don't.
harder. It sounds like you got to be a little more academically inclined.
I don't. I don't know. I mean, as far as like the ins and outs of recruiting, if it's different, I would just say that if you're thinking about being a guardian long term, maybe more than 4 years, yeah, it's going to require a lot of commitment on the individual's part to learn all the things that Space Force does, and not just like what it does, but the science and technology underlying those things. Absolutely.
Yeah. Gotcha. Very cool.
So
Awesome.
sorry,
Well,
I didn't give you a direct answer, but I don't want to
no,
put
that's
down any
okay.
airmen.
It
I
was
don't
a
want to
very
put down an
politically
airman.
correct answer. I will give you that. It was very politically correct. Um, I mean, we gotta poke and jab and have some of that friendly banter between the services. Obviously, it's Air Force. There's a reason that I joined the Air Force. It's not as easy to get into as some of the other career fields. Our cutoff scores for what your general intelligence level has to be seems to be a little bit more demanding, which is kind of cool. And they poke back. We got all that stuff. So this is the part where we get into the next phase of the show. We are going to introduce our next guest. Master Sergeant Davis is joining us. Hey, sir, how you doing? Introduce yourself to the internet at large out there.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Master Sergeant Davis. Super excited to be here and chat with you all about Air Force, Space Force, recruiting, all of it, and definitely be an advocate for you and your questions.
Awesome. Thanks for taking time out of your afternoon and joining us. We have got a couple more questions. I saw you post up something, and I want to give you a chance to kind of ring that one out. You posted something up in the chat to the inside here. You had something to say on the values, the core values for Space Force. What do you got?
Yeah, so I was just breaking them down a little bit further. So you have the character, you have the connection, the commitment, and the courage. So just like the Air Force has their core values, we have the four C's. And like, MSRNOP was saying, they're very similar in nature across the board. Just like the Air Force, we want outstanding individuals that are taking everything serious and bringing, everything they have to the fight. And at the end of the day, our four C's, their core values, it's all designed to make sure that we are doing the best we can with the people that we have.
Awesome. I like that. That's a good answer. Do you have anything to add from any of the questions that I was asking Sergeant OP? Because I know you've been sitting there quietly watching, waiting for your turn. Do you have anything to add to any of the things the questions that I had, or cool little points or comments? Because I'm learning like these little snippets of information about Space Force and things like the sheer number of assets in space and the number of things that are out there to keep track of and how fast they move. Like that was absolutely mind blowing to me. 17,000 miles an hour. Like most stuff on Earth in our atmosphere comes apart at that speed. Like how does that stuff work? Like it's fascinating.
Yeah, everything in the Space Force is exciting and growing and new, and you're constantly learning and evolving. So I'm fairly new to the Space Force. I've only been in the Space Force since May. So every day I feel like I'm learning something new. Every time I speak or listen to somebody like Master RNOP, it's definitely an opportunity to grow as a guardian, and I love it. And that's one of the main reasons I chose to switch, was to learn and open my horizons to different avenues that I wasn't familiar with. One thing I was going to hit on is, you asked if it's harder to go, Space Force over Air Force. And at the end of the day, it is a little bit harder, and we can go over and dive into some of those key aspects. But yeah, there's a lot of differences between the Space Force and the Air Force.
What's the biggest one you've seen so far?
What I would say is the biggest when it comes to the recruiting aspect is every job in the Space Force, you have to have a top secret clearance, right? Compared to the Air Force, there's a lot of jobs that you can do with not having to get that top secret. So when you bring a top secret involved, there's a lot of different aspects that an individual will have to make sure that they're meeting. As an example, let's say citizenship. You have to be a U.S. citizen to get your top secret clearance. So that's something
Sure.
to consider.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, it's about that time. About time to get to the back and forth section, and we will get some of the questions up on screen from our questions section that we are seeing. And let's see. Nope, that wasn't it. There we go. We'll get some of those questions up on screen, and we'll start answering those right now. If we could get one up, perfect. Is there a reserve aspect for those of us already in the space industry as engineers? You're gonna have to take that one because I don't even know if there is a reserve aspect at all.
For sure. So, yeah, there isn't at the moment. This is something that could come later down the road, but at the end of the day, right now, since we're so new and we're growing and we're trying to build our force at the active duty level, that we haven't really brought the reserve section in there yet. So at this time, no, but definitely keep watch because things are constantly growing and expanding. So this is something that could come, and when things come, it comes fast.
For sure, for sure. I know that it's taken everybody, like when you have a branch of service that starts, it takes a little while to kind of start to diversify and get that portfolio out. And Sergeant OP and I were talking about earlier that the number of people in the Space Force versus the number of people that are in the Air Force is hugely different. And it goes to show, I mean, you go anywhere and you see any kind of, like, so I was at AFA a couple weeks ago, and to see the number of that's the most Space Force members, Guardians I've ever seen in one place. And it was still like 100 to 200 airmen to every Guardian. So it's still kind of rare to see that. So it's really cool. And I think that's really awesome that you guys chose to be part of something that's so new. So, all right, let's go to another question. Do you have any advice for what I need to work towards in high school for the U.S. Air Force Academy? Okay.
Yeah, for sure. So at the end of the day, the academy is a very competitive avenue to go. So it's something that you do want to make a goal early in high school, middle school, even. You want to talk to mentors and your ROTC and different advocates in the city. Try to find individuals that went through the academy and see what they did. But it's going to be everything from leadership opportunities to clubs and organizations to good grades. If you're an athlete, sports, lead your teams, just different things. There's not one set path that's going to say, hey, if you do these things, you're going to get there. But
Sure.
if you do all of them, the whole person concept, we want to see that you're really putting the hard work in to get into the academy. So, yeah, it's tough, but mentors is going to be a huge recommendation on my behalf.
I gotcha. So one of the questions that I actually had that I didn't get a chance to ask Sergeant OP that I had on my list, based on your lower third, so your title information says that you are an officer recruiter superintendent. So one of the questions here I actually found kind of interesting. Why is it that we don't see Space Force recruiters?
Yeah, good question. So myself, I came from the Air Force, just like OP. 13 years in, made the switch. I was recruiting officers in California at the time, and when I made the switch, leadership within the Space Force saw my experience and asked if I could come over and help the recruiting mission because it still falls under the Air Force. So I'm the only enlisted Guardian within recruiting right now. We have some great officers out there doing amazing things, helping lead squadrons, but we don't have recruiters because we're still having to utilize the Air Force because we're so small. It's hard to get people when we're trying to grow. So we're working on it. We're trying to get them in there. And at the end of the day, one day you will see those Guardians out there in the streets recruiting people, but it's going to take some time for us to grow.
Very cool. Yeah, and that's so just to recap on that part right there. If you're interested in joining the Space Force, go talk to an Air Force recruiter because that's going to be your gateway. And they'll be able to point you that direction. So don't be afraid of talking to an Air Force recruiter and telling them, I want to join the Space Force. They're not going to look at you different. They're not going to kick you out of the office or anything like that. But that's where you want to go if you think the Space Force is for you. And that's, I mean, spaceforce.com is going to give you a ton of information. And airforce.com will help you find recruiters. And they'll help you if there's like a recruiter locator tool where you just punch in your zip code and it'll tell you where all the recruiters are around you. So there's some really cool tools that are online on spaceforce.com and airforce.com that can help you get started in that journey. So if you're looking at Space Force, go talk to an Air Force recruiter until you start seeing the Space Force recruiting billboards and or not the billboards, the buildings. So like you'll see Armed Forces Recruiting Center, right? You just go in there and you have to pick. You're like in a Coast Guard or Navy or Army or Marines or Space Force now and Air Force. They're just sort of going to be underneath. So look for the logo and go talk to those guys. Wait, we're not tracking aliens. Why not? That's a great question. Why aren't we tracking aliens?
Yeah.
You can take this one if you want to.
It's a great question. If
Yeah.
any question we get a lot, it's that question. And at the end of the day, there's so much other avenues when it comes to space that we're focusing on and our attention. Definitely, do some research on spaceforce.com and really dive into why we decided to make this branch. And you'll see that there's a lot of stuff going on in space, and that's not the main focal point for us. We got to protect our country from our adversaries, right? And
Yep.
space is one way that they can hurt us if we're not putting the work in.
Right, 100%. While we all think of, us non-Space Force people, think of space automatically thinking of the moon, thinking of any kind of like rocket ships and stuff like that, but then inherently you're going to think about aliens and stuff like that. Well, Space Force was derived out of a part of the Air Force that was getting to such a demand, not tracking aliens. It was tracking any kind of space movements, all that stuff, that space domain. And that's where that was born from. It was not to track aliens. So if we get there someday, it'll be really sweet. I mean, you can see it all over the news. That a whole side of conversation is getting pretty entertaining to watch. So are you able to switch to Space Force from another branch of the military? Great question.
Definitely. So just like us two, we both switched from the Air Force, but there's so many individuals from the Marines, Navy, the other branches that put their inter-service transfer packages in. So if you Google Space Force inter-service transfer, the website will pop up. They have some great questions and answers on there, and you can find the process, and it's pretty smooth for the most part. But at the end of the day, yep, inter-service transfer right now is one way, and we do have prior service avenues though as well. So individuals that got out, they could try to come back in.
Okay, so somebody got out, let's just say out of the Army or something, and they are like, "Ooh, Space Force looks like my jam. That's what I want to do." You're saying there's a process for those people to get back in, but join the Space Force, even though they had Army experience?
Correct. So same thing, reach out to the local Air Force recruiter. They know the process. We train them. We give them the information they need, and they can help you get back into service as long as you qualify.
Nice. Very cool. All right, let's throw another question up. Is it easier to switch from the Air Force to Space Force or get out and join Space Force? These guys are spending some time thinking about this. I like that. Marissa, that's a fantastic question. All right, what you got?
Yeah, I mean, that is a great question, and it's one of those answers where it's all about how many the inter-service transfers that the Space Force has taken, right, and how many people other branches want to release. Air Force, Army, Navy, doesn't matter. They're all going to release a certain amount of individuals. So if you're not one of those individuals that they're going to release, then you don't even have a shot because they don't want to let you go. You bring too much to the Air Force, right? So sometimes maybe it could potentially be easier. Now you have to worry about qualifying when you come back in. So
Right.
There's going to be aspects like MEPS all over again, different things like that. So really tough decision. You have to, do some soul searching, but yeah, either pathway, they're there for you.
Okay, so options. Definitely diversify your options moving forward. So that's good to hear. And also, it kind of depends on your individual situation, it sounds like. Does Space Force have a service song yet? I took part in Wreaths Across America, and they didn't play one.
Yeah, a lot of people might not have it on their radar, but there is one. It's out there. Definitely can find it. Wish we had it to play for you, but I'm not going to sing it. You don't want to hear me. But definitely there is one.
That's probably the classiest way I've ever heard somebody get out of having to like repeat something back that's been memorized. And trust me, we've got our songs memorized, but some of you guys do not want to hear our version of singing. Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. So classy move. I like that. All right, let's do another one. Okay, sorry, Walter with Drip. That's a great name. Where can I find enlisted pay for Space Force, or is it the same as Air Force?
Yeah, Walter would drip. At the end of the day, all branches go off the same pay scale. So it goes off your rank, and then you kind of go from there. So Air Force, Space Force, Army, at the end of the day, they're all going to be the same across the board unless you're getting incentive pays for whatever reason. But yep, same.
It's good baseline. If you have special duty pay or if you have incentive pay, those things you can get into all those details with a recruiter. But it's really going to depend on what you actually do in that service. And one other small change, or it's not change, but one other small note is when you're looking at that, your pay scale will actually be different depending on whether or not you're single or if you have dependents. So if you're married or you have kids, that rate will change because the Air Force and Space Force and all the other branches understand that once you start having a family, the cost of living goes up, it's more expensive, and you are compensated appropriately for that if you do have a dependent. So keep that in mind as well. But you can look it up. It's military paid tables, pretty much. Just make really sure you're looking at the correct year. Otherwise, you'll be in for a shock. You find one that's 20 years old, and you're like, that's like nothing. So, all right, let's do another one. Do I need to be? Oh, I love this. I asked Sergeant OP this question pretty much, but what do you got for us, Sergeant Davis? Do you have to be super smart?
Yeah, what I would say at the end of the day is you have to pass the ASVAB, right?
Sure.
That's going to be one of the qualifying factors. Now, besides that, try hard. Not every person that's in every room in the Space Force is extremely intelligent, that break in barriers and doing amazing things because they're so smart. But some people are going to work extra hard, put extra time and effort. They're going to have that book by their bed and they're going to study. Some people may come natural, and some people might have to put extra work in. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't say you need to be super smart to join. You just have to have the right work ethic and the right attitude. And we're going to give you the training and education you need. We're going to make you the best guardian you can be. But at the end of the day, you have to have the attitude.
I love that you put that in there because I was going to kind of say that. And that goes for Air Force as well. But Space Force and Air Force, they set a baseline. They have an expectation that you can meet a certain requirement, and that's going to be that ASVAB. Once you take that oath and once you join, that expectation will go up. We're going to put a pretty incredible amount of expectation on you to learn very quickly the specialties that we'll teach you. And then the expectations for performance on the back end of that will be what your peers looking in from the outside will consider very smart. Because some of the stuff that, even what appear to be the simplest jobs for airmen and guardians are complex tasks handling way more processes and programs than you would ever think are required. But we do it for accountability. We do it so we can keep track of our people, how well they're doing. It helps us with promotions and everything, but there is a ton of stuff that you're going to end up doing in the Air Force and Space Force that will make you pretty smart. So, this is awesome. Going to BMT, throw that back up. Going to BMT in less than a week. What should I be thinking about? And what may I not have thought to? First off, congrats.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, congratulations. That's super exciting. And welcome. We look forward to seeing you out in uniform. At the end of the day, talk to your recruiter and ask those questions. Make sure you're not missing anything. There's resources like the apps they provide. Make sure your family's taken care of. I think that's probably one of the biggest things people don't think of is their loved ones, making sure that they're good to go. You have the contact information you need to reach out to them. You have everything taken care at home. And if home's taken care of, then you're going to be taken care of. But at the end of the day, our training instructors, everybody's going to be there to take care of you and make sure that you're getting the training you need and you're getting everything you need to be successful out there. So don't stress too much, but your recruiter should be setting you up for success.
100%. Control what you can control, right? So the stuff on the home front, there's only so much that your recruiter is going to be able to help you get that squared away. He'll have advice and stuff like that for you, but control what you can control and don't stress too much about the stuff that you don't know or can't control. Don't worry about asking people who have gone through for secrets and tips and stuff like that. They're going to equip you with literally every single thing you need. All you got to do is show up with the list of things they taught you that they told you to bring, which is some basic toiletries and some clothes. And that's pretty much it. Everything else will be provided for you. Everything from the literature to the instructions to some of the best friends you're ever going to make in your entire life. All right. Is the Space Force basic training the same like the regular basic training?
Yeah, good question. So Air Force, Space Force, a lot of it's going to be the same, but the Space Force is adding more. They want more of a Guardian approach, more space-related material. So when you're going through it, they're going to have everything that the Air Force BMT has at this time, but they're going to have some additional space training in there. So if anything, it's going to be a little bit harder.
Like what?
But
sneak peek, got a little something for me. Like what? So what is different? What's the extra? What's the secret sauce?
They have some space fundamentals, and at the end of the day, what they want to start doing is get some constructive thinking in there. They want you to think outside the box. They're gonna give you little tests. I heard some. I'm not going to give it out there, but it's fun tests. They want to see if you can think outside the box and come up as
Okay.
a team and create different things and do different processes.
Right.
And they're teaching you how to do different briefings and pre-briefs, post-briefs, different things like that. They're starting you from this square level at BMT to be a guardian. A lot of times, maybe you don't get that training at the BMT
Yeah.
level. You start getting it in tech school, but a lot of the stuff they're doing out there, I thought was really cool when I got a little tour of it. But yeah, it's going to be a little extra until they are building their own plan, and that program will be released pretty soon. So at the end of the day, it's going to continue to grow and change and evolve.
Right. Yeah, that's that part got my attention when you're talking about any kind of briefing or working in teams to think outside the box for an innovative solution to something. That is 100% unlike, I mean, for the most part, unlike what I experienced in basic for Air Force. So there was no briefings. There was like, you had to give like a statement at the end of a patrol or something, or you had to work together to like figure out a problem, but that was normally in like field conditions. But it seems really appropriate. Like our job to make Space Force everything it can be is to create that opportunity for new ways of doing things, because this is kind of a new frontier. A little wink, wink, nudge, nudge there. But like, it's requiring a different process, a different approach. And I think that it's really cool that they're starting as early as basic training, allowing these young guardians to start shaping their process, right? What do you do when you need to solve a problem that's never been solved before? Whereas even Air Force being the second youngest branch, we've got decades of technical orders and manuals and procedure and stuff that we can refer to, but there's got to be a large majority of the things that are happening in Space Force that there are problems that we've never been faced with before, and we have to be able to count on that career-long training of how to think outside the box, or as we saw in the beginning of that video, outside the atmosphere. I thought it was a little corny, but also really cool, because how do you quantify outside the box? It's a mental image, but then to go that much bigger is just, it's cool. I'm gonna go watch. Once this show is over, I'm watching that video again. That was
Yeah, I
so
like it.
awesome. All
Yeah,
right,
don't
let's do
be
another one.
afraid to get out of your comfort zone too. That's a big thing.
Yeah, for sure. All right, what we got? Would love to know about Space Force mission statement and if you can dive deeper into the purpose of the branch. Sylvester
Oh yeah.
Macy, that is a great question. And I'm going to let Sergeant Davis take this one.
Yeah, so mission statement wise, it is securing our nation's interests in, from, and to space, right? So that's the statement. Now, the whole point of building this branch isn't just to create another branch because it's cool and there was a Netflix show and we're trying to be something different. It's because
Right.
there is threats out there that we have to invest manning and time and effort. And if we're not investing all these different things into that threat that's coming our way, then we're going to be caught off guard and we're not going to be
Sure.
prepared or ready. And at the end of the day, if you listen to our leaders talk, this is what they're talking about, how these cyber attacks can really affect us. And that's going to be the first thing that's going to happen sometimes. You don't know. It's not going to be ground and pound. It's going to be
Right.
fought, on computers sometimes. So the things that the Space Force can and will do to protect our nation is huge. And I get it all the time when I'm out and about in uniform. Why do we make this branch? There's all these other branches from some of these old veterans, and I understand. It's different, and you didn't grow up in this different world, these different branches, but it is a threat that's coming, and we have to be prepared for it. And why not
Gotcha.
invest?
For sure. And it's a really good point you bring up. You're talking about cyber warfare and those kind of attacks. We're all aware of it, right? We know about the risks that happen in the cyberspace, right? But most of us have never really felt the effects of what that kind of thing feels like. We do, however, know, based on whether it's experiences that you've seen in your family, or you've seen from history, what a traditional warfare, like that ground and pound that you're talking about, that traditional warfare style, with physical assets on the ground, fighting over actual terrain, and that kind of thing that we've been doing for hundreds of years in war. This cyber warfare is totally different. Those cyber threats, it's easier to mask them. It's easier to hide them. They don't look different, and people don't even realize that they're happening. So that's going to take a big shift for people to understand not only the magnitude of what those things can do, but how to be ready to answer them if they happen. And yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
it's all like, that crazy level of like almost abstract thought to fix problems. And it's super fascinating. It's cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's do another one. What is the work area with the highest demand currently in Space Force? Does the base security force belong to Space Force itself, or is it still part of the Air Force? Good questions. We might have to bring that one up. Let's handle the first one first. What's the work area with the highest demand currently? So what is
So
it?
I'll,
Is it still a
I'll
career field, or is it now MOS, or do they switch that back?
So we have SFSC, Space Force Specialty Codes.
Go
So
figure.
what I would say is, everyone's important. They're all growing. One we hire more, I would say, would be the space system. So the individuals working on the satellites, a lot of different mission sets within that world. So you could be doing a lot of different things, like you were talking about debris earlier. Some people are
Mm,
just tracking debris, missile defenses, different things like
mm,
that, GPS. So a lot of variables when it comes into these different fields. But at the end of the day, we don't have a lot of SFSCs. We have space, we have intel, we have cyber. On the officer
sure.
side, we have engineers and acquisitions. It's a small branch with a small pool of specialties, which is cool and exciting. And I think the second half was talking about security forces. I think I
Yeah, I
got
think it was
from it.
base defense. Can we bring that one back up?
Yeah. So
They're keeping
that
him on
my
his
answer
toes
kind
back
of
there.
goes into
Does
that.
the base security force belong to Space Force itself, or still part of the Air Force?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, a lot of things still fall within the Air Force's scope, like security, medical, different things like that, services, individuals around the base, taking care of us. At the end of the day, it might be a Space Force base, but we're still utilizing a lot of Air Force career fields to help the mission sets. So we're growing. It's all going to come. We'll see how it goes, but definitely
sure.
we can't do our job without the Air Force's help.
Sure. Well, we're happy to be here to help. The Air Force seems to help with a lot of mission completion. And just to clarify, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you mentioned that there are entire jobs out there where these guys track debris. And while that may sound insignificant potentially, like if you're talking about, okay, so instead of tracking dirt on the sidewalk, my job is keep track of dirt and debris and rocks in space. Well, to put that into context, I'm going to refer back to that super sweet video we watched at the beginning of the show. It says that a piece of debris or a piece of metal the size of a coin in space can be weaponized. So, like, put that into context. Yeah, we have to track those things that are in space because they're going 17,000 miles per hour. I forget exactly what the miles per hour is of like a bullet out of a gun, but in feet per second, you're talking several thousand feet per second, and that's microscopically slow in comparison. So if one of those things that's not being tracked hits a satellite, hits an asset, or another space rock, I guess, I don't know what you would call them, things can happen when stuff runs into each other. You got some laws of physics that come into play there when you start moving things at that kind of kinetic energy and they come in contact with other things in space. So while keeping track of space debris may not seem like an important job or very cool, it's really crucial when you think about what the impact could have if it wasn't done. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. I mean, you broke it down perfectly. Think how much those assets cost and how much time and effort, and it's not easy to build one of those. And we put them up
right.
there for specific purposes. And if we're not tracking all those things and moving satellites when we need to, then we lost one, and then that's going to have a huge ripple effect on our nation's security. So we have to make
Okay.
sure that we're doing that part of the mission.
I got a sheer curiosity question. Obviously, if we're responsible for making sure you're talking about moving them at a precise moment, what is like the typical rank of someone whose job it is to move a satellite to keep it from maybe coming into contact with something it's not supposed to?
Yeah, well, these teams are working together from brand new guardians to their leadership. They're tracking it. They have computer systems that are really monitoring these things.
Sure.
It's not something where you're just catching them off guard and you have to move it within a split second. They're
Gotcha.
doing a great job of making sure that they're utilizing all of their different mannings, the civilians, the LTs, the airmen, or guardians as well. Everybody's working together to make sure that these everything's taken care of.
Gotcha. Somebody popped up in the comments, and this could be accurate, but it says lieutenant or civilian, but that's still kind of crazy because if you go officer, so basically if you come talk to you go officer in the Space Force, you could be in your early 20s making decisions to move just things that you'll probably never see in real life, massive pieces of equipment that are flying in space at unbelievable speeds. You can make decisions for that stuff. So if you think that you want to do something that makes a difference, oh man, that's up there. So, so I just checked the time. I did not realize we were this close to the top of the hour. So we got time for like one or two more questions. We're going to get these knocked out of here, and then we'll clear out and wrap up the show. But for now, let's pop one more back up on screen and see what we got. How important is cybersecurity, and will a master's degree help with joining the Space Force? Also, is it true that they are bringing back warrant officers? Two great questions. The first one, I'm going to let you take, Sergeant Davis.
Oh yeah. So cybersecurity is huge. Like I said, we only have a few SFSCs, and that's one of them. So that's something we're putting a lot of time and effort into making sure that we're protecting our country through. As for the masters, when it comes to joining as an officer, let's say, it's all about what the master's is in and how it will reflect to the Space Force. But we do see the education as a whole. So if you have a master's degree, that means you can learn, right? You've been through school, you've done a lot of great things. So when you put an officer application in, they're going to see your transcripts, what courses you've taken, your grades, your GPA, all that good stuff. And I will see if there's a pathway to get you in as an officer. But yeah, we have officer boards throughout the year where people can apply for them if they qualify.
Okay. Is that real similar to the way the Air Force does it?
Very similar, almost identical at the end of the day. There's maybe a few little changes here and your recruiter can go through, but real close.
Sure. And if you've been looking at Air Force and you're considering doing Space Force instead, or if you have been looking at Space Force and you're seriously considering that, airforce.com, spaceforce.com, like I said earlier, use that record locator not record locator, geez. That's one of those terms that you just accidentally spit out once you're in the military. Go on that website and then use the recruiter locator, and you'll have a drop down that'll actually ask you specific questions about what kind of job you're looking to do, whether you want to go enlisted or officer. And if officer is your path and that's what you want to do, those options will be there, and it'll link you up with an actual officer recruiter that's close to you. And if the Air Force was your original option and the Space Force is looking like a pretty good choice now, if this show has helped out at all with answering some of those questions, still keep down that path and find yourself a Air Force recruiter who can help get you into Space Force. Because the job is to put the information out there. And if this is helping, that's what we're here for. So we got time for at least one more. Let's do one more. How can I join? I would love to be Space Force Guardian. Be a Space Force Guardian. Is there a position for me here? My grandfather was a Titan III engineer from Vandenberg. I have hopes and dreams. Thank you. That's awesome that your grandfather was a Titan III engineer. Vandenberg is one of our biggest space operations bases out there in California. So how do you join? Sergeant Davis, tell us, how do we do it?
Yeah, for sure. So at the end of the day, that's the people we want. We want people that want to be guardians, right? It's an exciting branch to be a part of. It's growing really fast. So we want people that want to be part of us. At the end of the day, it's easy. You find that local recruiter. They're going to go over qualifications with you. They're going to go over what needs to be accomplished. It's pretty smooth. If it's enlisted, it's the ASVAB. If it's officer, you're going to take the Air Force officer qualifying test. And then from there, you're going to get physically qualified. You're going to submit your application if it's an officer. You'll have to do interviews for either enlisted or officer. So that's one thing that I would say that Space Force does a little bit differently than the Air Force on the enlisted side, is there is a little interview that you have to do. And that's just to gauge, an individual's interest and, if they, would work out with the Space Force. But everything's pretty much the same. It's not too bad.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of parallels. So really cool opportunities, very cool opportunity to get on the ground floor of something special, big, 5 years old, less. It's just all new. I've got a ton of questions about it. So this show has been really cool for me to learn more as well. So I want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I'm sure you're incredibly busy. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff to keep track of in space. But thanks for taking time to answer some of my questions, answer some of the questions from our guests or from our viewers on the show and from the chat. Really appreciate it. And hopefully we can have you back on the show someday. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And for everybody out there, thank you so much for joining us. You know the deal. We do this the last Tuesday of the month. And man, Space Force, it's pretty cool. Space is tremendous. It's big. It's hard. Like, there's a lot of things out there that we don't know yet. And if you want to join the Space Force, go talk to an Air Force recruiter. They will point you in the direction of the best route to get you into the Space Force. So until next time, we will see y'all for chaplains. We're going to do chaplains next, and that's going to be March 26th. And this one's actually going to be a pretty cool show. We've done something similar to this in the past, but we're going to do it again because we've had a lot of requests for it. Chaplains and the services that they provide are more than just religion-based. There's a whole lot of who you are as a person that drives some of the stuff that these guys do, and they're some of the most caring and knowledgeable people that I've ever met in my entire life. So we're looking forward to that. That's going to be in a month on the 26th of next month. That's Tuesday, March 26th, right here on the Back and Forth. And until then, aim high, Semper Supra.
We hope that you enjoyed this episode of the Back and Forth, brought to you by Headquarters Air Force Recruiting Service. It is a privilege for us to bring you all the information and insider insight into the exciting world of the United States Air Force. Remember, this show is all about you. We want to make sure we're providing you information and answers you need to make an informed decision about your future. So make sure to join us every other Tuesday with your questions, your feedback, and any ideas you have for future episodes. We are all ears. Don't forget to subscribe to our social media channels for even more exciting content. And also visit airforce.com for all the latest information on serving as a Total Force Airman. And with that, until next time, aim high.